Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the East Lindsey series. This is the biggest district in Lincolnshire, containing 188 civil parishes. Without further ado, here's today's offering. Welcome back to East Lindsey again, people. Now, if you watched last week's episode around Covenham St Bartholomew, you'll know exactly where we are this week. It's the second part today of the continuous walk around the two Covenham villages. We've seen St Bartholomew. We're now going to carry on along the path where we left it last week into Covenham St Mary. The East Lindsey series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop, located at 20 Ropery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Covenham St Mary, Cove village of St Mary. Alright, so last week we had a great little walk in the rain around the first of the two Covenham twins, i.e. Covenham St Bartholomew. This week we're in its smaller neighbour, which is practically conjoined to it. This is Covenham St Mary, separated from its namesake by a stream. Like most Lincolnshire parishes, Covenham St Mary would have been, and still largely is, an arable farming parish. It sits on low-lying ground where drainage has created usable land, and the wetter areas would have only supported the grazing of cattle. We've already seen how many drains there are in this area. Much of the drainage is man-made, owing to the construction of the Louth Canal. Beforehand, natural streams would have made their way to the North Sea. Covenham St Mary is a similar village to the one we've already seen, but at the same time also looks and feels a lot different. It's hard to understand why, but I think the answer comes in the form of Newbridge Lane. That to me seemed like the main street here, a long and twisty lane that runs to the western bank of the Louth Canal. As landmarks go, it really only has two. One is an old school and the other is the Church of St Mary, which stands less than a quarter of a mile away from its redundant counterpart, St Bartholomew. So let's finish this walk. This is Newbridge Lane, and it's fair to term this Covenham St Mary's main street, even though it's not the one that passes through the village centre. Well over half of Covenham St Mary's residents live on this very road, because the rest of the village is just a collection of 2 or 3 other streets and cul-de-sacs with very little housing on each. Character-wise, Newbridge Lane seemed to me at least to be rather upmarket. Loads of properties are big, detached affairs. We're not talking council terraces down here, folks, that's for sure. It's definitely Covenham's most affluent part. Because it's all residential, this gives me a chance to tell you a bit more general information about the Covenhams, which I didn't get a chance to last week. They're both roughly 5 miles north of Louth and sit a little over 2 miles east of the A16. Whilst Covenham St Bartholomew is a long and straggly road, St Mary is more compact, built largely around a triangular junction of lanes. The whole area is just 5 metres above sea level, but the land to the immediate east is much lower. This makes sense because, lest we forget, centuries ago, the Covenhams would have been on the vast Lindsay Marsh. Although not marshy now, water features are still plentiful, and that includes the man-made ones, like this Anglian water pumping station on Ings Lane. At this point, a bus came past me. It was a school bus, but the Covenham villages do get a regular service bus too. It's the PC38, which runs between Louth and Saltfleet. A lot of people who live here commute, but most have their own cars. Farming is the only real employer in the village itself, but centuries back it was all about salt making. The Domesday survey noted that Covenham had at that time an impressive 7 salt houses. Now we come to the Church of St Mary, which sits immediately north of the main junction. It's a fairly typical example of one that began in the decorated style and finished in the perpendicular. It has an unusual western tower constructed in a mixture of chalk and ironstone, which is very light in colour. It's 15th century, but it's topped by a 19th century bell stage. Documentary evidence records the licensing of the chancel in 1359, a date consistent with the architecture. The hedged churchyard is rather tight and compact, making it a challenge to photograph. I struggled just to get these shots. So when I said that Covenham St Mary is the smaller of the two Covenhams, I wasn't joking, because just after this church, that's effectively it. We've walked around both of the two Covenham villages, and this one was really rather small, wasn't it? However, we're not quite done with this episode just yet, because I am going to drive out of Covenham St Mary towards the next one. We'll pass an old schoolhouse on the way, and we'll see whatever else is in the countryside between here and the next parish in East Lindsay. Well, not quite. There are a couple of houses left between the church and the border between the Covenhams, but they're spread out somewhat and most are set back from the road. You can't really see anything. None of these are listed buildings, nor do they have any kind of known historical importance. In terms of listed buildings, by the way, the Covenhams only have 5. These are the 2 churches of St Bartholomew and St Mary, a war memorial located in the cemetery, the mill house on the road to Fulstow, and Hayth's farmhouse close to the bend where this walk began last week. Our last job is to make our way through the farmland south of the village in order to get to the next one. In doing so, we're using Ings Lane, another tight, narrow and often twisty road that seems to be susceptible to a bit of surface water in places. Do be careful if you find yourself on this one. The only other landmark we have left to talk about in either Covenham village is the old school. It was located a long way south of the village we've just walked around, so one can only imagine how much fun children would have had getting to school in the days before cars. Covenham's was a public elementary school, and it was built to serve both villages in 1842. Despite that, students were also accepted from Fotherby, Utterby and Little Grimsby parishes as well, which probably explains why the old schoolhouse looks so big. I'd guess though it may have had a modern extension these days. Regardless, we are done, and both Covenhams are behind us. I'll see you next week for more here in East Lindsay. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.